Hello there, friends. Mr. EU here, reporting live for Sloptide News Network, your most trusted source for all things Darktide, and of course, Skitarii. And this might be the very last time we talk about Skitarii prior to when we will all be able to see this class live and in action, because tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, that's 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, you can see this class live on at least 3 channels that I know of. Mechanicus, Joe Plays Games, and Vamp. That's alphabetical order. And those creators are in the early access program, and Mechanicus and Joe Plays Games have agreed to playing while I act as their faithful servo skull, servitor drone, and like any good servitor drone, I will be performing data interrogation. I will be grilling them about everything they've seen about the class so far. We'll be getting them to look over all the talents and showcase the weapons, all that good stuff. And I'll be going back and forth between the streams. So you can tune into one of them, all 3 of us. I will be just sort of multi-streaming their different perspectives, so hopefully I can give my commentary and provide some value there. But very, very cool. I'm glad to have friends who are allowing me that opportunity. And with that being said, let's hop into what we got today, which is weapons. One of the things that I will definitely be keen to see tomorrow. But we have a dev blog here on the weaponry, so we have some exclusive weapons, and there's even a little bit of a treat in here. There's a special weapon that I didn't even expect that we would be getting, so that's really, really awesome. So let's scroll down here, and we'll talk about the weapon design. As you can see, we've got the Galvanic rifle, the arc rifle, the transonic blade, the fork, the phosphor pistol, the arc maul, and the power sword in there. And as far as their weapon design, what they seem to have done here a lot is draw on past iterations of weapons and put like some of those concepts into these. So we'll see some of the Hive Scum's weapon concepts coming into play here. We're seeing iterations on how power and charge work instead of the conventional power weapons with the relic blade and the power sword. We're also seeing new mechanics like arc. We're seeing something that phosphor pistol has that's different. So I think they've done a great job of making these very unique and different. And we'll start down here with the arc maul. The arc maul is a powerful blunt weapon that can electrocute enemies and trigger the arc mechanic. So as they say, the arc maul is very similar in concept, right, to the shock maul, which several classes already have. So they have to endeavor to differentiate that. And the way they've done this is by making the arc maul, instead of having an activated taser mode like the shock maul does, the arc maul was going to activate arc on its activated mode. And how this works is when you're meleeing enemies, you are going to be building up charges, basically building up battery charge. I guess it's like shuffling your socks on the carpet. You're going to build up static charge, and you're also priming those enemies. So every enemy you hit when you're not empowered is going to be electrocuted, which in this class's term is priming them to then be arced off of. And then once you empower your weapon, every strike you make is going to arc to all of the nearby electrocuted enemies. So what you would do ostensibly is cleave a bunch of horde, and then you'd activate and start hitting on the higher health targets with your single target attacks, and then you'll arc and clean up everything else, which sounds really cool. So obviously, like, cleave would be very powerful on this weapon. It is a blunt weapon, so there's a good chance it might have Skull Crusher as a blessing, which would be insane. As they say down here, though, this weapon is not exactly that powerful without the arc mechanic. It relies on it to deal most of its damage. So you might be seeing a weapon that is not all that strong single target here, but again, if it does boast Skull Crusher as one of its blessings, it might be very powerful, because that is an insanely powerful blessing. Then we come to the paired transonic blades. So the paired transonic blade, this is one that had a little bit eluded me in terms of how they would execute this, and I'm very excited about the direction they're taking this, because this bears a lot of striking similarities to one of my favorite weapons conceptually in the game right now, but maybe not in execution, and that is the crowbar. Because the paired transonic blades here, instead of having a activated mode where they then get rending or whatever, what they've done instead is they have a light armor mode where they are tuned, quote unquote, attuned to light armor or to fleshy targets. And that'll give you sort of sweeping strikes and horizontal slashes or horde control. And then you will go into a strike down mode that is an armor piercing mode, where you're going to be calibrated for flak and carapace, and it's going to do overheads and thrusts. And the problem that the crowbar runs into here, because as you might recognize, the crowbar has a very similar setup. The crowbar has that blunt side of its weapon where you can swing and clob stuff, all over the place, get good horde clear and cleave. But the crowbar, the pry bar part, it takes a long time to flip that thing around and then start prying and stuff. But to address that, what they've done here is they have made that there's a special move that translates between the two movesets. So you'll be in light mode and you'll press your weapon special as you're attacking in the combo, and you will seamlessly slide into those armor piercing attacks. And so there probably, I would imagine that it probably is a strong attack, transitioning from one to the other, and then you transition back the other way as well, which also gives a special attack. So it's really, really cool that those have unique attacks, and that will hopefully, if this is executed right, which, hopefully they learn their lesson from the Hive Scum, it will be smooth enough that players will be encouraged to play with both sides of the blade. Because with a weapon like this, as with the crowbar, the scary part is, okay, you don't want to incentivize players to only play with the strike down piercing mode or with the cleave mode. You want to encourage them to swap back and forth. So if they made it seamless enough, and if they made both types powerful in their own way, they could have a really, really big success in their hand here. Plus, this blade looks awesome. These blades look sick. Also fork. We then have the Mechanicus Power Sword. So this Power Sword is going to be different than the existing Power Swords. The Power Swords in the game currently, we have two other quote-unquote power swords. One is the Veteran's regular power sword, which has a limited number of strikes you can do once it's empowered, and that's kind of annoying to reset all the time, even though the Mark 6 power sword is very powerful. Then we have the Power Falchion, which is kind of mid at best. It's just a weaker version of Relic Blade, one-handed Relic Blade with mid damage, and it has a heat gauge where when it builds up, it has to power off for a while. And then now we have the Mechanicus Power Sword, which is going to have, much like the Arc Maul, a set of charges, but instead of with the Arc Maul where it seems to build up from striking enemies, this is going to build up over time. And when you have these charges, they don't specify exactly how many you get, I don't think, but when you have these charges, you will have a passive buff to your overall weapon power. So this is going to kind of act in the way that the Relic Blade's empowering does, but you're going to get a passive buff to damage, rending, whatever it might be, and then you can use some of those charges to activate weapon special attacks. So you can get an empowered strike, you can choose to either hold the weapon special button and do a heavy empowered strike, or tap it to get a light empowered strike, and those will consume charges, and that will reduce the power of your blade passively for however long it takes to regenerate, right? So you can make a trade-off in the moment. Do I want a big burst of power to one shot or two shot this guy, or do I want to continue cleaving or whatever with the passively boosted stats of the weapon? And I would guess that this weapon probably does recharge when it's in your offhand, sort of in the backpack, so to speak. So if you could run a range build that's got range, and then bring this out when you're backed into a corner, you will have all those strikes ready to go. So you can, focus a lot of the big power attacks on one target. So this might be good to, be a weapon that you're swapping to somewhat frequently, where you can use those power strikes and then put it away and let it kind of recharge passively. Kind of very cool. I love the mechanics like that make you think about your most optimal way to use your charges. Then we have the Galvanic Rifle. So the Galvanic Rifle, this weapon is, I think, a lot of players' favorite just aesthetically. It, of course, kind of harkens back to the Garand. People were talking about the Ping, but it also kind of looks like a musket in the same sense. It's somewhere in that era, right? It's a classic sort of, 1900s, 1800s-ish design. A lot of old West lever action rifles are probably inspired as well. So the Galvanic Rifle, it doesn't seem to have too much going on in terms of unique gameplay mechanics here, but tell me if this description doesn't make you think of one weapon in particular. Perhaps if you're a Vermintide 2 fan, you'll ping on it as well. The Galvanic Rifle is a powerful semi-automatic precision rifle that fills a niche that hadn't been covered in Darktide's arsenal yet. Each shot deals relatively high damage and can do a good job at piercing through armor, although it has a low ammo count. So, the weapon excels when aiming down sights and landing weak spot hits such as headshots. It's a simple but elegant weapon that feels extremely satisfying to shoot with. So if you're anything like me, you heard this and said, well, welcome back. Barden's handgun, right? This is just the handgun from Vermintide 2, I would imagine. Big, loud report for shooting, absolutely clobbers on headshots. Not exactly a sniper, but it's definitely a marksman's weapon. And it has a low ammo reserve, but each shot has the potential of just instantly killing whatever you want to point it at. So yeah, you're going to point this thing at, hopefully we can one shot, some of these scary maulers and stuff. Because the problem is some of these, a lot of the enemies that are kind of scary and beefy in the game, they have carapace heads, but maybe we'll be able to get some rending with that. But obviously being able to have at least the power to one-shot things like ragers and things, if you have good aim, very cool. And plus, remember, there is an auto aim ability in the talent tree for this class, so we could see like some absolutely crack, sort of assisted crack shots with this thing. And I like the idea of having a weapon that, instead of what a lot of Darktide weapons go for, which is just like, okay, the weapon has to both be powerful and it has to have enough ammo supply to just like clear the entire map. This weapon is going to be powerful, but you'll use it selectively, much more akin, as I imagine, to like how Vermintide 2 functioned, where you didn't have enough ammo to clear everything, but you would use your gun to pick off targets when you were able. So this will be like, you're going to get high power out of it, but you're going to be scrounging a little more often. But of course, again, ammo regeneration is a feature on this class. We'll see how that plays out, and if there's any additional ways we can sort of augment our supplies to continue sniping. Then we go to the arc rifle. The arc rifle here is probably the most disappointing for me because it doesn't have a charge trigger, unfortunately. It does seem like it is just going to be that zap, 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 and the basic mechanic is no different than I explained it when they last talked about it, where every time you hit an enemy that's electrocuted, it arcs to another target and then electrocutes them. And so what'll happen is you could continue to shoot like targets in the horde who are electrified. It'll jump to more and more targets until eventually your one shot with the arc rifle is hitting like 10 plus targets. And that is going to be a good way to clean up hordes, I would guess. I don't know. It says it has high ammo capacity, but it takes longer reloading than most weapons. TBD how much reserve ammo that means it has. And also, I don't know. I'm always kind of like reserved about weapons that are horde clear range weapons, when I could just do that with my melee. And, obviously the exceptions being like Flamer and Flame Staff, where like these weapons can just do it so exceedingly fast. But this just sounds like it might require too much setup to really be useful in comparison to just going in there and stabbing stuff with your old stabbies. So this one has probably got my interest the least out of all of them. But the one that does have me very interested is the Phosphor Blast Pistol. It's a gigantic hand cannon is what it is, says Eric. So the Phosphor Blast Pistol is probably the one that I've been the most correct on over time, I would say. The Phosphor Blast Pistol was one that even back like a year ago or whenever, when I was first like, oh, they should totally do Skitarii. That definitely makes, like, that would probably be the best next class, right? I was thinking that this was one that they would absolutely pull from the rule books, because it's just right there on their page, and it makes so much sense with the mechanics that exist in Darktide. So the question was down to exactly how they would execute it. I kind of always assumed it would be some sort of focus target effect, because it illuminates the target, and therefore it's supposed to prime your allies to attack them. So what it's going to do is when you shoot the target, it deals high damage to the target, but instead of adding burn, which I thought might be the target, the effect when they got white phosphorus on them, it instead splashes that target and nearby targets with the phosphor. So they're lit up, and they're now going to have an additional damage taken modifier, so much like the focus target from Veteran Keystone. And then they're also going to have reduced hit mass, so they will have attacks cleave through them more easily. So this weapon, it doesn't seem to have a very large reserve of ammunition, but I think what sounds really cool about this weapon is that it's a setup weapon, right? It's a combo weapon where this is going to prime enemies. It's like a primer. If you are what game am I thinking of? I guess I'm thinking of like Warframe, right? You have like a primer secondary, right? Where you put like 15 statuses on an enemy. So we're going to prime with our secondary, then we're going to swap to our primary and we're going to blow them up. So potentially this will be like enough of a boost if you 1-2 combo with it to, one-shot a crusher or something like that. So I'm very excited to see like what potential combos can come out of a weapon that has these sort of effects, where we can debuff the enemies, make them take more damage, make them easier to cleave. And it might be a thing that you like swap over and just pop a shot on everything in front of you, splash it onto a bunch of enemies, and then now you clean them up. So that could be really, really cool. This weapon has had me excited since I first conceptualized it might be coming, and it seems pretty cool here too. And now we get on to the weapon that caught me the most by surprise, which is, of course, the Plasma Gun Mark III. Not only are we getting a new plasma gun, it's going to be on both the Skitarii and the Veteran. And the Veteran is being kind enough to lend his Plasma Gun Mark II to the Skitarii. So both of these classes will now have 2 plasma guns apiece. And the Plasma Gun Mark III, much like the more AoE-focused howitzer version of the bolt the bolt gun that launched last October, this is going to be a splash damage plasma gun. So instead of piercing and penetrating through enemies, it's going to hit types of enemies and then explode and deal radial damage. So that sounds pretty cool to me, honestly, especially if it scales with like explosion, explosion radius or something like that. I don't know if maybe Skitarii will get anything in the tree, but I mean, AoE explosion plasma gun sounds pretty cool, and that will trigger, it says, when hitting most enemy types, so maybe it'll be like only armored types of enemies. I don't know exactly what that necessarily means there. And then, yeah, so beyond that, of course, we have all the other weapons that are coming to the class. So we have all the exclusive weapons, that's 6 weapons in total, 7 if you count the fork. And then we have the range weapons here. So infantry autogun, braced autogun, vigilant autogun. You know, these guys just get crammed onto every class, and it's just kind of unfortunate. Like, they keep trying to, like, offer them to every new class in the game. Be like, you guys want to play with them? And everyone's like, nah, man, you're good. I'm all right. The problem if you are new to the game or you're uninitiated is that the Vigilant Autogun basically is like a BB gun, and I cannot really foresee a reason why we don't want to use this weapon over the Galvanic rifle if you're trying to go for, like, you know, marksman style play on this class, or really any class. There's always a better sniper. Then we have the Braced Autogun. This Braced Autogun is a very low damage, low accuracy, low movement speed, and has no headshot incentive or ability to land headshots, and it just gets outclassed by the Shredder Auto Pistol in like nearly every way. And then the Infantry Autogun is probably the one that's the closest to being viable in the current state of affairs, but that is limited a lot by its ammo capacities and the ammo consumption that it absolutely devours. And that means that maybe the Skitarii here, with some of the ammo regeneration talents that we've seen, might be able to alleviate that, but I have my reservations on that front. What I'm really hoping is that there is a patch coming with this update. You know, traditionally there is a balance patch of some sort that comes out with every major update. They don't tell you until the day of when the actual patch notes drop, but yeah, having that that on the horizon, I'm just wishful thinking that they will buff bullet weapons in general, because those are generally very, very weak in the game right now. But then we have Heavy Las Pistol, a very solid weapon. I'm surprised not to see Recon Lasgun here. They probably maybe thought that was a little bit oversaturated. I'm also very surprised not to see Infantry Lasgun here, because Lasguns, of course. Then we have the Plasma Gun Mark II and the Plasma Gun Mark III, as we just established, the Quick Draw Stub Revolver, and the Shredder Auto Pistol. I am moderately surprised to not see the Bolt Pistol here, or the Bolt Gun, in some regard. And then the melee weapons, we have the Assault Chainsword, you know, pretty crap weapon, but I kind of expected it to show its ugly head here because it is a mechanized weapon. Then we have the Devil's Claw Sword, which is not a very high-tech weapon, but this weapon has a lot of potential for combos and synergies. If this class has any sort of retributive or perfect block mechanics, this can be a very, very powerful sort of mechanic to synergize with that. So I look forward to seeing if maybe there's some sort of gimmick you can run with the Devil's Claw, because that parry is just absurd when it's paired with the right stuff. Then we have the Shock Maul, so another weapon here that can proc Electrify. It cannot arc, obviously, because the Arc Maul, you know, you have to have a weapon with arc, but if you have an arcing secondary or an arcing ability like a grenade or an ability itself, then the Shock Maul will still be able to prime enemies with Electrify in order to get them ready to be arced off of. And of course, the Shock Maul has Skull Crusher, so there is at least one weapon in the arsenal here that can give us Skull Crusher, and it can use that taser to paralyze enemies, which is pretty fun too. We have the Power Falchion. I can't really see myself in any earnest way using the Power Falchion when they have a Power Sword, which just seems like it's going to be a straight upgrade to that. The Power Falchion has always been a very slow-moving weapon and doesn't seem to offer enough power for my taste. And then the Combat Blade, so just the regular old knife. And depending on what level the knife unlocks at, that might very well be the best leveling weapon for the class, because knives are generally pretty early unlocks in terms of leveling, and they are very, very powerful all game long thanks to their bleeds and innate backstab damage, etc. So yeah, it'll be fun to be a little knife wielding psychopath as well. Kind of interesting a little bit that they put two kind of low tech weapons on the class, but hey, they probably wanted to diversify. I'm certain this is probably somewhere in the lore as well. So as far as what the devs here think that there are their favorites, Mateo says that he really likes the dual transonics because, as he says, it's similar to the bone saw and the crowbar. It's got the weapon swapping between the modes that are effective at different types of enemies, and the bone saw, right, has two different green and purple that are meant for tackling enemies that are vulnerable to the toxin or enemies that are not vulnerable to damage in general, respectively. And then Eric says the Galvanic rifle and the arc maul, pink and bong, ping and bonk. So yeah, I think these are going to be very satisfying aesthetically, and I can't wait to like hear how some of these weapons sound as well, because they always nail the sound design. So that's everything for you today, guys. Hopefully it was a nice little recap and you got nice and excited. So as far as what you can expect to see from me going into tomorrow and across the weekend, I will of course be streaming being the Servo Skull to Jefficus and Joe, and just asking them to relinquish the data to me, and I will be trying to put out a primer on some of the weapons tomorrow. So I'll be going over the exclusives on each class, showing the blessings, and talking about like what they can do, showing some of their movesets. And then beyond that, I'll do abilities. My goal is to, by Tuesday when this class rolls out, is to have shown everything there is as far as, okay, here's what some of the abilities can do, here's what the blitzes can do, here's what the weapons can do. So you will have an idea going in, okay, I might want to build towards this sort of character with this weapon and that. And then, of course, we'll diversify from there as I'll start to put out builds and flesh out the designs more. But that's just what we have to look to on the horizon. It's bound to be super exciting, guys. We're almost to Skitarii tomorrow. Thanks for watching, everybody. Mystery out of here. Have a great one. Bye-bye.